Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Statewide Advocates Call. I'm Alicia Harding, our Digital Campaigns Associate. I'll be passing it over to Marquez, our Organizing
All
Director.
right, thank you, Alicia. Like she said, my name is Marquez Thompson. I am the organizing director here at Democracy North Carolina, and I have the privilege of introducing you to some of the things that are happening. What the heck is happening in North Carolina? Let's talk about it. We've got the militarization of ICE. We've got attacks on immigrants. We've got the SAVE Act. We've got federal funding freezes. The Gulf of America. Let's think about that. We've got taking the T out of LGBTQIA plus. We've got HB 10, attacks on DEI, the stripping of environmental protections, and then we've got DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. So a lot of heck is happening across the country, and definitely in North Carolina. We are affected by this, but fortunately, we have brought together several experts tonight to talk about it. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Rodolfo Martinez, Helen Galez of El Pueblo. Rodolfo is from a Mexican. Alexander Sorato is from the NC Budget and Tax Center. Natalie Watson is LGBTQIA plus Center of Durham, and Rania Monastery is from the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network. So we hope you'll stick with us tonight and to hear about these important issues and how we can prepare for the rest of 2025. So I'll turn it over to the one that will host us through these panel discussions. That is Saisa. Thank you so much, y'all.
Howdy, y'all. My name is Saisa Schumann, she, they. I am the Volunteer Program Associate here at Democracy NC and have the pleasure of moderating our panelists. I don't want to talk about me, though. We're going to get right into our first panelist, but first, a slight introduction. Our first speaker tonight is Rodolfo Martinez Torron, the leader of advocacy and civic engagement with the Association of Mexicans in North Carolina, a 501c3 nonprofit focused on fostering the appreciation, understanding, and prosperity of the Mexican and Latino community through advocacy, culture, health, education, leadership, and binational programs. Rodolfo is a dedicated community advocate and undergraduate student at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke College of Business. Born in Hidalgo, Mexico, and raised in Eastern North Carolina, Rodolfo's passion for equitable access to opportunities, including higher education regardless of status, drives his work across academic, nonprofit, and civic spaces. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you to you and to Democracy NC for having me.
Absolutely. So our first question is, in moments of crisis, such as ICE raids and arrests, rapid response efforts can be life-saving. Can you walk us through what an effective rapid response looks like and the role community members can play in these efforts?
Of course. So with the Mexican being over 23-year-old Latino serving organization in Eastern North Carolina, we have a little bit of experience in this. And I'll mention that an effective rapid response to ICE raids and arrest involves preparation, swift action, and community support. In a real life scenario, such an event can occur in a matter of minutes, and each second of those minutes really matters. There are a lot of different scenarios in which one can encounter ICE agents. It is important to remember your rights, be prepared, and have plans pre-made in case of such an instance. While it is happening, it is important to remember your rights, such as those that are being shared through various red cards or uh, by the guides that amazing organizations like El Pueblo, which they'll talk about in a minute, have listed. For example, like the do not open the door, invoke your Fourth Amendment right to not let them in your home, make sure they have a signed judicial warrant with your name and signed by a judge, hence judicial. And as sometimes it can be signed by an immigration official, which makes it not valid. If in the worst case scenario, someone is being taken away, right? So at your question, it is important for community members to record what is going on, if it's safe to do so, without interfering with ICE agents. You're free to ask them for their names, badge numbers, but never get physically involved or ever put yourself in harm's way or at risk. If someone is detained, it is important to have their alien number or a number, and again, just the name, not something I'm calling it, as I don't believe that nobody is an alien. Um, but it's a way to track them. Think of your tracking package when you order something from USPS. And it's just the easier way to call in and say, "Hey, I'm looking for Rodolfo Martinez." Uh, there may be a lot of people named like me. They may not know at what detention center I'm being held at. So just remembering my A number, which immigrants usually get when they are processed or if they have submitted an application to immigration for any adjustment of status. And remember, it is not over when a person is taken by ICE. So it's not game over. Please do not give up then. You still have a fighting chance, and it's definitely on a case by case basis, but it's not over, and you can still fight, or you can still get an attorney to fight for you, even while you are in deportation proceedings, which again is on a case by case basis.
Alrighty, thank you. Our second question is going to be, local sheriffs have significant influence over how immigration enforcement plays out in their communities. How important is it for sheriffs to take a public stance against collaborating with ICE? And what impact does their leadership or lack thereof have on immigrant communities?
Of course. So a Mexican is a nonpartisan organization, right? But sometimes they may feel like, local like elected officials sometimes may only interact with our community that they're afraid to interact with, sometimes only during election year. And a Mexican is doing something about this. We're hosting different sheriffs know your rights sessions. We're hosting one with Democracy NC just later this week with Greene County sheriffs, as sheriffs play a crucial role in shaping how immigration enforcement unfolds at the local level, and their public stance on collaborating with ICE at a certain point, because they have to, after HB 10 they have to. So we're not asking sheriffs not to, we're not asking sheriffs to commit a crime or anything. We just want them to stand up for our community, to relay this information and be transparent with our community, uh, just because we don't want to create unnecessary fear. It's like, for example, we had a session with the Wilson County Sheriff's Office. They were straight up with our community. They told them we had 120 community members show up and show out, and they told them we have to abide by these laws. But this is what you need to know about them. This is how you can stay safe, and this is how you can stay protected. And why is it so important for somebody to do that? Even that, or a social media post or anything. One, it's important because it creates trust within a community, within the sheriff's office. Their mission is to support all residents regardless of their status, as there's many statuses and visas and so on and so on, but their mission is to protect them all. And we don't want there to be an incident. For example, if a woman is being beaten at home by her abuser, she either has one of two options. One, she calls it in, she reports it, and then all while having the fear of her being deported, because she thinks that that's what that collaboration between ICE and the sheriff's office means, or she stays home and continues to get abused. And it doesn't have to be like that. She can still trust the sheriff's office. And that's all we're asking sheriffs to do. And again, that just mentions like the severe consequences of a sheriff not standing out. And we're reminding our communities to remember this come next year, or come election season again, that your voice is your vote. And if you don't like what you're seeing right now, you definitely have the opportunity to change it for next time.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to let you know we have about 5 minutes left on this panel. And the next question is, beyond immediate crisis intervention, how can communities build long-term resilience and preparedness to protect immigrant families from the harmful impact of ICE enforcement and those who maliciously impersonate ICE?
Yes, thank you. So at a Mexican, we believe that building long-term resilience and preparedness to protect immigrant families requires a combination of a few key components. And these are education, community empowerment, and strategic partnerships. A great example is a Mexican's collaboration with Interbanks Legal Services, a nonprofit law firm who serves our Latin community in Eastern North Carolina with various legal service like immigration. We both saw the need come January 20th. We both saw the need of our community, but we both recognized that each of us lacked one or another thing that the other organization had. So what did we do? We partnered up and collaborated, and we now host in-person and virtual know your right sessions, and that's all it takes, a conversation and recognizing of what you can and can't do and doing something about it. And during these know your right sessions or deportation defense clinics, we go over different possible scenarios that could occur in which one may come in contact with ICE agents and what one can do. We also go over how one can stay as protected as possible and off of ICE's radar, as well as preparing free different types of powers of attorneys to ensure their properties, finances, and children, family is taken care of in case of their absences. And I'm going a little slower because I remember the interpretation. Overall, it is important to remember that education is key, and through learning all this information, our communities can stay safe and protected one and can protect one another, especially with community leaders. You recognize these activists, these leaders that go out and about their way not only to inform themselves but inform their community. So we really like to invest in these type of community members, and we call them our promotores, our community promoters, and they ensure that all of these informations reach every crack, every corner of their communities. And lastly, I just want to create an emphasis on collaboration and teamwork. It can be anything as well as like collaborating with churches, schools, and businesses to designate safe spaces where families can seek shelter, resources, and emotional support during or after an incident is crucial. Just imagine, like, for example, I know we had a case a couple of years back. Somebody's father, a 16-year-old girl's father, was taken in front of her. It's just like, what does that little girl do? So it's just like always, because these things happen. These things happen. These things are real. It's happening in our state and it's happening in our country. So it matters to know.
Thank you so much. We have about a minute left, but I wanted to see if maybe we get a quick answer to our last question. Thank you so much for everything you've already shared. But what are some of the biggest challenges your organization faces in responding to ICE raids, and how can allies and advocates help strengthen these?
Of course, I'll do a quick one with this one. So, a Mexican wishes to further continue collaboration with traditional non-immigrant serving organizations, as we realize, and we want everyone to realize, that immigration impacts us all, regardless of your status, whether it is a loved one, a friend, a colleague, a boss, or maybe that guy that you just see every other day, or person that's just a friend or you just encounter all the time. You may realize. So we just believe that we need and we're struggling to connect with these traditional organizations and also finding trustworthy immigration attorneys to refer our community members to. Overall, just capacity, funds, and collaboration.
Thank you so much, Rodolfo. And I want to say thank you also to your organization and Mexican for providing all of that information. We are going to move to our next panelist. I will introduce them briefly. Clinton Galeas is a policy organizer at El Pueblo, where she works at the intersection of policy and community organizing to advocate for immigrant rights and social justice. She focuses on legislative tracking, advocacy efforts, and mobilizing community members to take action. Passionate about empowering communities, Helen is dedicated to ensuring that people have the knowledge and resources to navigate policy changes and advocate for their rights. She holds a BA in politics and international relations from UNC Charlotte. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi, no, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we can jump into the questions. The first one is, in light of more public federal actions targeting immigrant and undocumented communities, how has your organization responded to ensure that advocacy, health, and education remain accessible to those affected?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. So in response to these harmful federal actions, El Pueblo has taken several steps to protect and empower our immigrant and our undocumented community. We developed the Familias Seguras Guide. Let me show you guys. And so with our guide, it's to inform community members of their rights and to equip them with the tools they need to create an emergency plan. This resource, as you see right now, is in Spanish. It will be in English soon. For all of our mixed status families. And so additionally to that, we are hosting Know Your Right workshops to ensure that individuals understand the laws, they understand their rights under them, and know how to respond, if ever, in encounters with law enforcement. Beyond advocacy, we're also actively tracking policies like SB 153, educating the community about its implications, and providing civic education to empower all community members to advocate for themselves and to advocate for their communities. Finally, I'm sure you guys know about the Faith Action ID. It is a community issued ID. It is a crucial resource at this time. And so through our drives, we're able to invite partners and connect community members to healthcare providers, mental health support, and other essential services, ensuring that legal status does not become a barrier to accessible and basic needs.
Thank you. That guide has definitely landed in my email box, so it's out there and it's a really great resource. Our second question is North Carolina's legislation like HB 10 requiring sheriffs to collaborate with ICE and SB 132, North Carolina Border Protection Act, requiring the state's budget office to audit public benefit programs, drives false narratives that immigrants are a drain on our public service system and pose a threat to public safety. What are the broader implications of these policies?
Yeah, so legislation such as these are rooted in misinformation and xenophobia. So these policies do not enhance public safety. Instead, they fuel fear, racial profiling, and family separations. If I may, I'm going to give you guys a quick breakdown of SB 153. This bill includes 4 major provisions, so each one with its own dangerous implications. The first is that it does require state agencies to enter into agreements with ICE. So agencies like the Secretary Department of Public Safety, the Secretary of Department of Adult Corrections, when you think of the commanders of the state highway patrol, and the directors of the State Bureau of Investigation. So think of like the state's FBI. They would all have to enter into formal agreements with ICE. This would increase collaborations between law enforcement and immigration authorities, further criminalizing the immigrant communities. The second part of this bill, as you mentioned, does require the Office of State Budget and Management to audit public benefit programs to see which one of these programs and to what extent the undocumented folks are using, benefits that they shouldn't. They also want to audit employers to check and confirm that workers do have a legal status. However, there's no need for any of this. Like, we already do have federal laws that prohibit our community from being able to access such benefits and even go through the employment process that most of us would, go through, which is through E-Verify. We pay taxes while being excluded from public benefits. And, children in mixed status families, children that are still citizens, often have to access these benefits, but even though they are entitled to them, are not able to. And this becomes another barrier. This is also perpetuating the false narrative that immigrants are a burden on public resources, when in reality, immigrants are essential contributors to North Carolina's economy. They're essential workers, taxpayers. We know them as business owners who contribute to the public programs without even being eligible to benefit from them. And so beyond that, these policies deepen this division in our communities by painting immigrants as these others, like these folks that are coming in and are stealing our jobs and, taking the education. And it undermines the value of inclusivity, safety, and collective well-being that benefits everyone in the state of North Carolina. Briefly, I'll mention that Section 3 of the bill seeks to penalize local governments that adopt sanctuary policies, despite the fact that North Carolina law already prohibits sanctuary cities. So this is unnecessary, and it creates fear rather than addressing real community concerns. In Section 4, the universities would be barred from adopting any policies that limit enforcement of federal immigration laws. And this further entangles education spaces with immigration enforcement. Again, we already have laws for most of these things. So we're seeing a pattern of our leaders focusing on the wrong things, wasting taxpayer dollars and government resources that harm communities instead of investing in education and healthcare and honestly all essential services that we need. By forcing state agencies, college campuses to cooperate with ICE, it's also eroding the trust that we have with law enforcement. So when people, fear deportation, they're also less likely to report crimes, seek help, as Rodolfo was mentioning, or cooperate in any sort of investigation, making it all, overall our communities unsafe. That's what's really, what's going to create unsafety for us. So we also can't ignore how racial profiling is already a disproportionate thing that happens within the Black and Brown community. And so these policies are only going to lead to more civil rights violations and deepen racial injustices. So as you can see, all of these things are the broader implications of these policies. And it's important for us to acknowledge them, know them, and share them. And that's one of the things that El Pueblo is trying to do really hard right now.
Thank you so much. And our last question, we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, is in this moment, what does meaningful solidarity look like? And how can concerned community members take action to support their immigrant neighbors?
Yeah, so I really like this question because I think all of us being on this call today is already a really important step towards, solidarity. Even if these policies don't directly affect us, they still impact your community. They still impact your neighbor. They still impact your, children's friends, and North Carolina in its totality. So it's important, and it's great that folks are still, are willing to stay informed and are now taking actions. And so one thing that we ask is that you keep up with bills such as this one. The newest one that was also introduced was HB 318 by Dustin Hall. So, keeping up with bills that are anti-immigrant, anti-anything, email and call your legislators, let them know that you oppose them and ask them to oppose them. Attend public hearings, and please, 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 we need allies more than ever before to take a stand for the community. So folks don't feel safe right now, and they definitely don't feel safe to speak up and share their own stories. And so this is why we need community members such as yourselves that can come up right now and basically fight for policies that protect and not criminalize our communities. And it also looks like joining one of the Know Your Rights workshops. So, make sure to bring a friend, join on the call, put those headphones in and just listen and stay engaged, take notes, and make sure to share that information with everybody that you know, so that this way we can all, support immigrant neighbors. Lastly, I think it's really important that we support organizations like El Pueblo, like a Mexican, like every other folk that's on this call right now, making sure that, if we can volunteer, that we're volunteering. If not, at least we're doing some resource sharing, or at least we're able to provide some financial support to continue providing direct services or advocacy and continue to do the work that we're doing right now. Because now more than before, nonprofits, organizations such as the ones that, like the ones on this call today, are being attacked. And it's more important than before for all of us to stand together, stand in solidarity, and take action whenever we can.
Thank you so much, Helen, for all that you just shared. Thank you for representing El Pueblo and all of the good work that you do. We really appreciate all of that input. We're gonna kick it over to our next panelist, who I will briefly introduce. Alexandra is the Executive Director of the NC Budget and Tax Center. Alexandra works to connect the dots across policy areas and identify opportunities for building the base of support for policies that will deliver better outcomes for all North Carolinians. Before joining the Budget and Tax Center, Alexandra worked at Action for Children NC, now NC Child, on economic security policy, and at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York in the Community Affairs Department. Alexandra has experience at community-based and international non-governmental organizations in the areas of community development, asset building, and family economic security. Alexandra received a joint master's degree in international relations and public policy from the University of Chicago and studied anthropology at Haverford College. Wow. I'm going to get into our first question. Thank you so much for joining us. It is recent federal budget policy decisions, such as changes to discretionary spending caps, adjustments to social safety net funding, and shifts in federal workforce allocations, have directly impacted communities in North Carolina. Can you break down some of these budgetary changes and how they are shaping economic conditions for workers and families in the state?
Great. Yeah, I'm very excited to be with you all. Thank you so much for including this topic. It is essential, as are all of the topics that are here tonight, talking about how we build communities of opportunity across North Carolina. And federal funding is really a critical tool that we have in North Carolina to make sure people have what they need, to make sure our communities have the infrastructure and the opportunity. Federal funding provides roughly the equivalent of our entire state budget in public dollars to communities across North Carolina in a given year. And what we've seen in just a few short weeks of the new administration at the federal level is a rush to shift funding priorities. And the problem with that is multiple. One is that the first actions we saw were federal funding freezes, as you mentioned. These federal funding freezes are illegal and most often done to block the progress on key priorities that communities, that our Congress has voted on to appropriate money to. And so by coming forward and freezing dollars, we have seen many really important projects stall in advancing environmental safety, economic opportunity across the state. And again, this is in direct opposition to the rule of law that Congress has the opportunity and the authority to appropriate funds. The freezes are also doing something really important to note, which is creating uncertainty. Uncertainty for businesses that contract with government, for nonprofit organizations that receive federal funding to deliver services. While a lot of clarity has been brought in the few weeks because of a lot of work by a lot of people to try and figure out what the federal funding freeze meant, there is still a lack of clarity, and that uncertainty fuels really problematic decisions on the part of businesses and nonprofits. The second piece I'd say we've seen happening is that the federal government has begun reducing federal employment across a number of agencies. We've seen significant reductions in force. These reductions mean that federal employees don't have dollars coming into their household budget to spend in local communities, that there are real threats to ongoing increases in unemployment. In North Carolina, there are roughly 84,000 federal employees, but we know that there are many more who are federally supported through grants and other funding. And we know that when a federal employee loses their work, that impacts their community because, again, spending patterns change. So those are two really important ways in which the federal funding decisions are impacting our state. But the real big debate that we need to stay focused on is the congressional discussion about a budget resolution. Right now, the House and the Senate have voted on budget resolutions that would deeply cut access to health care and food assistance in order to finance an agenda that focuses primarily in the Senate side on deportation. And on the House side the proposal would finance even bigger cuts to the taxes paid by ultra wealthy people across the country. So The proposals right now are looking to use these cuts to services that we all benefit from, that we know deliver better economic outcomes for all of us, in order to finance an agenda that gives the ultra wealthy more tax breaks. And so that proposal right now is being negotiated behind closed doors between the U.S. House, the U.S. Senate, and the Trump administration. And that's, as that rolls forward, it will be critical that we pay attention to what is in there, because again, it's people will be hurt, but also a lot of costs will be shifted to the states. So when the federal funding is cut, they're likely to force the state to pick up the cost of delivering services, or the state will have to cut services. And frankly, our state is not in a position to take on additional costs that the federal government is currently covering, because we've continued to cut taxes at the state level for very wealthy people and profitable corporations.
Thank you so much. Our second question is, there is often a disconnect between federal economic policies and how they are felt at the local level. What tools or strategies does your organization use to bridge that gap and ensure that communities understand and can respond to these policy changes?
Thanks for that question. It is an unnecessarily complicated area of policy, frankly, but we know that what matters most is that people know that this is their money, that we all contribute to make sure that our communities have what they need by paying taxes. We all pay sales tax, we all pay property tax, many of us pay income taxes and other fines, fees, contributions to what makes it possible to fund opportunity in our communities. And so these are our dollars. They're dollars that we should demand go back into our community and make sure that families have health care, that families have affordable food to put on the table every night. These are things that we want to connect the dots to. And so a lot of our work is trying to take these abstract numbers. One of the cuts being proposed is $1.1 trillion. How do we break that down and show exactly what would happen if we cut, tried to cut services at that level across the country? What would that mean for a community in North Carolina? Well, we know that, for example, there are 1.4 million households receiving food assistance right now in our state. If we reduce the funds coming in, the reduction in the ability of those households to put food on the table will increase hunger. And so the more I think we can both follow the money and show the human impact, show what it means for our communities, for our economy, I think we can break down what feels like abstract numbers to be very real, very human experiences that we'll all have if these cuts are allowed to continue.
Thank you so much. And our last question, we've got about a minute left. For those looking to advocate for a more equitable economy, what are some of the most urgent fiscal policy issues people should be paying attention to, and how can they engage in shaping public policy change?
That's great. Thank you for that question. I think the most time sensitive, there are two time sensitive opportunities that I would note. One is Congress is on recess starting next week, March 17th. This is a critical time to communicate to Senators Tillis and Budd that North Carolinians do not support any budget resolution that would take away health care or food assistance from North Carolinians. The more we can communicate with them that this is not an option for our state, for our families, the better. The second opportunity, because they'll be going back and negotiating with their peers in the Senate and in the House and need to hear from us. The second opportunity is to communicate to state lawmakers that they need to be prepared for the potential cost shift of this federal funding chaos that we're experiencing. they need to be prepared to ensure that communities have what they need going forward. And that means right now, pausing the scheduled elimination of the corporate income tax cut in North Carolina. Profitable corporations should not be paying 0% income taxes when working families can't find childcare for their youngest children, when children aren't going to schools with the latest textbooks or materials they need to learn. We need to readjust and put children, families, and communities first and make sure that we have the funding long term. So engaging on those two issues is really critical right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, and to the NC Budget and Tax Center for keeping us abreast of everything that's going on. We will be moving on to our next panelist, who I shall be introducing. Natalie Watson, they, them, is a Durham native and graduate of North Carolina Central University. They have been working and volunteering with the Triangle LGBTQ nonprofit since 2014 and have been on staff at the LGBTQ Center of Durham since 2021, first as the Deputy Director and currently as the Acting Executive Director. Natalie's background is in operations and customer service work with an emphasis on supporting social service-based organizations. Natalie resides in Durham with their wife and 3 cats. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Are y'all able to hear me? Awesome.
Okay, so we're going to get into our first question. We've seen both historical and ongoing efforts by the federal government to restrict the rights, freedoms, and existence of trans and queer people. How do these policies impact the daily lives of communities you serve, and how has your organization responded?
From just a higher level, it brings up a lot of questioning about what aspects of our lives are now legal and what aspects of our lives are not. There's a lot of confusion happening because executive orders keep coming out, once a week, multiple times a week, that changes what's happening. And so right now we have the LGBTQ community is facing a lot, and there are some folks who are trying to divide the community because right now trans folks are directly being attacked by the policies that are being created. And some folks are trying to separate trans folks from the LGBT community. And those are the type of things that we're coming up against. People are scared and they are trying to figure out, well, how can I save myself? And unfortunately, that's just not how community works. And that's one thing that I want to emphasize on this call. We have got to get back into community. We have to get back to connecting with each other. Something as simple as going next door to your neighbor and having a conversation. We're at that point now. Direct impacts, it looks like some organizations deciding to remove pronouns and LGBTQ related things from their websites because they don't want to lose funding. That means that there are funders of ours who might not even acknowledge that we are receiving funds from them because it's detrimental to their bottom line a little bit. We've seen an increase in just overall anxiety, folks coming into the center, youth coming into the center and saying, hey, like, can I still transition once I turn 18 and I now have, autonomy over what I'm doing? And we're having to say, as of right now, we don't know. And it really is hard to tell people we don't know. And I want to also let folks know that, like, as much as we're learning and we're spewing it out as quickly and as fast as we can. But a lot of it is just responding on the fly. So it looks like, for instance, we're hosting the Trans Day of Visibility on March 23rd at Durham Central Park from 2 to 4. That is how we're going to respond to them trying to erase trans people and LGBTQ people from just everything, right? We're going to have our tea day and folks can come out, drinks, DJ, the whole nine, and really celebrate and be visible as trans folks and let people know that regardless of the policies that are coming out, LGBTQ folks will exist, will continue to exist, and will continue to fight.
Thank you so much. Second question. From bathroom bans to restrictions on healthcare and education, attacks on LGBTQIA+ rights are not new. What lessons can we learn from past resistant movements to effectively push back against these policies today?
I also want to thank you for the questions because these are really thoughtful questions. And existing, not shying away, literally walking out your front door is a form of resistance that is miraculous and does a lot more than people realize. Part of what these policies are doing is they want us to go back into the closet. They want us to hide and no longer be visible when we are normal, everyday to day folks. We have jobs, we have lives, we have, we go in and get our teeth done too, and we get like to have dinner and all those type of things, right? And so one of the biggest resistance that we've seen is community. It is saying, okay, heard, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to go away. So for instance, the LGBTQ Center of Durham will exist. We're going to continue to exist. It means that we're having conversations offline. It means that the same way that we did in previous years, right? Resistance looked like going to your fellow neighbor and saying, hey, how do you feel about this? You don't like that? All right. Let's see who else doesn't like this. Okay, let's get some folks together. Let's have some conversations. What is it that we want to happen? Okay, heard. How do we then help the people in our immediate circle? I think we need to start from a micro standpoint and then go macro at this point, because the macro is coming down on us. We got to start with where we can touch. And so what we've learned from past resistance movements is that existing is some of the biggest resistance you can have, and then taking up space in that resistance and not shying away is one of the biggest things you can do.
Thank you so much. So next question, for those who want to be in solidarity with trans and queer communities, but may not know where to start, what are some meaningful actions they can take to support both individuals and the broader movements for LGBTQIA+ rights?
So I suggest checking out your local LGBTQ organizations. We have several across the state. The LGBTQ Center of Durham is located in Durham. We have the LGBT Center of Raleigh, which is in Raleigh. There's a center in Greensboro. I would suggest start Googling and looking for LGBTQ organizations, and we will have resource pages, and they will have lists of resources that you can look at. I would suggest start following the ACLU of North Carolina, Democracy NC, Equality NC, and your local community-based organizations. Follow their social medias. They're giving action items that people can do so that it's not just sitting at home and reading a book, right? It's like sometimes people want to go out and do something. For us, going out and doing something also looks like you can come volunteer. You can come to our center and you can come hang out and you can get to know the people who work here, see the humanity, and share that with other people, and then also give back by volunteering. We have folks who sit at the front desk. We have folks who help out in our basement with our youth center. You can always give back monetarily as well, to help support folks. Something that I do want to kind of highlight is not just federal dollars are being impacted, foundations are now being impacted. If you have assets of $500 million or more, the government will now be looking at you to determine what programming you're going forward with. I don't know if I was supposed to say that, but I did. I'm trying to be truthful and transparent. That's another thing. Once we learn stuff, y'all, we really are trying to share as much as we can. And specifically on our website, our volunteer page has multiple ways that you can volunteer and connect with us. Yeah.
Last question. We got about 3 minutes left, so feel free to take your time. In the face of federal rollbacks on LGBTQIA+ protections, what role do local communities and grassroots organizations play in ensuring the safety and well-being of trans and queer individuals in the South?
Folks need to pause and stop reacting and take a minute to kind of consider what information is coming through. We do need to do we got to do some civics training here, a little bit of explaining like, what does an executive order mean? How does that impact? If a lawsuit happens and something is stopped, how does that impact? We need to start having more of those conversations so that folks, sorry, hold on. There you go. We got to start with those conversations. And then we need organizations to not shy away. If you supported the LGBTQ community, still support the LGBTQ community. Do not hide. If you had your people using pronouns in their signatures, keep using pronouns in your signatures. If you had inclusive, and this is like in general, like if you had inclusive marketing that had Black people, Asian folks, LGBTQ folks, disabled folks, keep doing that. Do not shy away. Know that what a lot of what's happening is not necessarily either legal or enforceable at this point. But it's scary. It's very scary to know that the country that you live in, the higher ups are essentially saying, we don't believe you exist. And if you do exist, we don't believe you should exist. And so we need organizations to say, you're a human. You're intersectional. You are more than just LGBTQ, but that is also part of who you are. We stand by you. So that looks like, again, keep those pronouns in there. If you have flags up in your center, if you have flags up in your organizations, keep them up. If you have concerns about safety, reach out to us. We are working with community members so that folks can feel safe. We are going to continue forward with events, and we are asking community members to show up and have their head on a swivel so folks will know that we are watching, but we are going to continue to be present. So be present along with us. I do want to address one thing that was asked on the side. Trans Day of Visibility will be March 23rd. That is a Sunday. Durham Central Park in the middle of downtown Durham, visible from 2 to 4 p.m. It is free. There will be free food, there will be drinks, and there will be a DJ, and it will be a very affirming. We will have security on site. It will not be someone with weapons, but there will be security on site to make sure someone has a head on a swivel, and that if anything needs to be reported, we will respond.
You had me at visibility and you got me at free. So thank you so much, Natalie, and all the work you do at the LGBT Center of Durham, specifically. Go Bulls.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to introduce our next panelist. Dr. Rania Mahtri is from the artificially divided land of Greater Syria. Since 1993, she has organized for justice and against systems of oppressions and wars. Through protests, teach-ins, and conferences, political organizing, writings, and media work, and nearly 2 decades of teaching holistic environmental sciences, including environmental justice at the university level. She recognizes the intersectionality of struggles and the need to stand in solidarity, not in charity. She is in awe of the wonder, language, and beautiful socialist nature of trees in a forest, and dreams of a world in which we all strive to be Mother Tree. In honor of the land and the resistance fighters against colonialism, she asks, what can we achieve today for tomorrow's world? Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
I'm going to start with our first question. Environmental injustice disproportionately affects low-income communities and communities of color. Can you share some of the environmental justice issues your organization is currently working on in North Carolina and how they connect to broader global struggles?
Thank you again for this question, and thank you for organizing such a panel. I want to start by saying that the oppression did not start with this presidency. Let's not forget that oppression existed before this presidency, from mass deportation to oil drilling, from mass incarceration to drone warfare, from defunding social services to funding genocide. The difference is the vulgarity is out in the open now. And I personally think there's strength in the clarity of that vulgarity that we can use. So with that as the grounding, to look at environmental justice, I think it's critical that we first define what it is. There's the EPA definition, it's kind of blah. The definition that I prefer is to say environmental injustice is a product of exploitation in which marginalized and working class communities, predominantly Black, Brown, and other oppressed groups, bear the brunt of environmental harm, while wealthier communities, predominantly white, profit from extractive industries and environmental degradation. We as environmental justice activists recognize the beautiful quote by Chico Mendes, environmentalism without class struggle is just gardening. And as much as I love gardening, we're not gardeners. So through that, what are some examples of stuff that we do at the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network? I'm just going to give you one highlight because we could go on, one highlight of that intersection. We are working now with a myriad of other organizations to talk about the avian flu pandemic. It's not yet a pandemic, but it's coming. So the avian flu. Now, avian flu is intrinsically tied to the industrial agricultural system that other people call factory farms, but there ain't no farms in industrial agriculture. It's industrial agriculture. It's intrinsically tied to that. And when we look at the harm caused by avian flu, we see it is tied to the harm that is caused to the farm workers themselves. And thereby, when we look at farm workers, we have to look at immigration, we have to look at ICE, we have to look at police brutality, we have to look at the harms that were caused in their home country to make them travel to a foreign country. We have to look at all of these aspects when we deal with farm workers, as well as look, of course, at linguistic equity. When we're dealing with industrial agriculture, we also look at contract farmers that are victims of the economic exploitation of the monopolization of industrial agriculture. So how do we liberate them from that economic exploitation? I can go into more details about that. We also need to look at communities. It's not a coincidence that the largest industrial agricultural industries in North Carolina are in the communities of the formerly enslaved plantations. So if we look at the map of North Carolina and we see where were those enslaved plantations, those are where we currently have the largest concentration of industrial agriculture. That's not coincidence. It's because those communities have been deemed by policy after policy to be disposable, to be okay to have them be sacrifice zones. So we'll put the poultry, the hogs, the turkeys, all there, plus the landfills, plus in vivo wood pellets, and we might even throw in a gas pipeline, and we might even have natural gas and methane explosions. It doesn't matter because we have deemed those communities to be disposable. So we bring all that together when we talk about avian flu. We don't just talk about what is happening to the avian flu itself, as some environmentalists choose to do. I'm just giving you that as one example. And we can talk about a lot of other things. We are about to start a We Keep Us Safe series. We were doing lots of different kind of capacity building series, and we're about to start a We Keep Us Safe series where we are grounding how do we keep our communities safe? How do we keep our communities safe from ICE, from doxing? How do we know our civil rights and what remains of our civil rights? And how do we do that all through that intersectional work that as environmental justice activists we believe in? Now, you asked, how is this connected to global struggle? I love that question. We don't just want to move injustices from one area to another area. We want to work to dismantle the very foundation of injustice. So therefore, we are connecting to the global struggle by recognizing that pollution is by design, poverty is by design. These aren't accidents. By recognizing that both of them are natural consequences of capitalism. In a nutshell, capitalism is when the number of empty houses in the United States is more than the number of unhoused. That is what capitalism produces. Let me repeat that. In the United States right now, the number of empty houses we have is more than the number of unhoused. The only way to justify that is through capitalism. We recognize also that racism, otherwise known as white supremacy, is designed to justify these policies of capitalism. We recognize that racism is a consequence of slavery, not a precondition to slavery. Once we have these foundations recognized, then we take it a step further and say, okay, we therefore reject the philosophy of disposability. No land is disposable, no community is disposable, no person is disposable. We take those philosophies, that understanding, and we learn what Rosa Luxemburg taught us, that capitalism has a need for constant expansion, and this need drives imperialist aggression. Thereby, we recognize as local environmental justice activists in North Carolina that militarism, wars abroad, and incarceration in the United States, which deems Black and brown bodies to be disposable, that both of these fulfill the very policies we want to change. Therefore, as EJ activists, we stand against imperialism, we stand against militarism, we stand against capitalism, and we try to make these intersections all the time while we talk about avian flu, for example, while we talk about CAFOs, while we talk about air quality, while we talk about the myriads of environmental injustices we face in North Carolina.
Bar after bar. That was a mouthful. Thank you so much. Our next question is, your organization works at the intersection of climate, racial, and social justice. How do these issues reinforce one another, and why is it essential to address them holistically rather than in isolation? And I feel like you've already touched greatly on this.
I'll give you one example. Everyone now is talking about climate change. Okay, climate change is like a multiplier effect. It makes everything worse, and it affects marginalized communities, again, particularly Black and Brown and communities of color, more than it affects others. And I'm going to give you a number. Flood zones in North Carolina. Okay, we look at flood zones in North Carolina. From research that came out a few years ago, we know, get this, low-income Black communities are already experiencing greater inland flooding. Inland flooding, not coastal flooding, inland flooding. Inland flooding is 7 times more likely to occur in low-income Black communities compared to high-income white communities. Now, ask me why. We go into the history, who gets to live where, et cetera, you know, and there's an amazing history behind that. So when we look at climate change, one of the things that climate change is going to do is going to increase flooding. It's already happened. Where? Predominantly Black and then predominantly low income, those 2 communities. And what does that do when we increase flooding? What are the consequences then of inland flooding or coastal flooding, which already, by the way, already impacts 1 million Carolina residents, right? Already coastal flooding. So we take that, we know that that will increase food insecurity, which means more people will go hungry. And we already have a lot of people going hungry in North Carolina. It will increase the difficulty of getting safe, reliable drinking water. And don't get me started on drinking water, but let me just throw this little fact at you. In Wake County, we have folks with more lead in their drinking water than folks in Flint, Michigan. So when we talk about reliable drinking water, it's going to make what is already difficult for poor and Black folks to be even more difficult. It will make it harder to have a safe home. And remember, just a few years ago, the home insurance companies decided, you know what? It's not profitable for home insurance companies to insure homes along the coast. Why? Because they're more likely to flood. So we're not even going to insure those homes. So you can now think about those folks living along the coastal areas. They don't even have home insurance, but they have a higher risk of flooding. What are they going to do? And these are just some examples of how it's all tied. So when we recognize these linkages, we can't just go, well, the governor says, our previous governor, Governor Cooper, said he's going to increase electric vehicles, and that will be our solution to climate change, right? No, because even if you're just going to look at transportation, electric vehicles only support those who already can afford a vehicle. So we're already removing a sizable percentage of our community that needs that kind of support. So we need to be thinking holistically. We need to be thinking about a full economic plan. We need to be thinking about different kind of housing structures. We need to be thinking about a different kind of a community, a different kind of policy. We need to be saying the C word much more often than we currently are. We need to be talking about dismantling capitalism and what that means. And we need to have the courage to demand it and to imagine a world free of capitalism. Otherwise, we're simply going to be putting bandages on folks that have cancer. We can't do that.
You just made just speechless, but not actually, because I have to ask this last question. And I definitely don't want to redact any of the things you have to say, but we have about a minute left.
That's all.
I'm gonna smush it. I'm gonna smush it together. Communities most impacted by environmental injustices are often the ones leading the fight for change. What are some powerful examples of grassroots organizing in North Carolina that have successfully challenged environmental harm? And for those who want to support the fight for environmental justice, but may not be directly impacted, what are some meaningful ways they can show up in solidarity with frontline communities?
Okay, I'm going to challenge the question because I think we need to reevaluate what it means to have success. So to me, success starts by naming the problem. If you have the courage and the wisdom to identify the problem, that's the first aspect of success. If you're able to go from mobilizing to organizing, you've done the second step. We're good at mobilizing. How good are we at organizing? If you're able then to build strategies and to have your strategies be adaptive, such as when we do win a lawsuit and they change the law, what are we going to do next? If we're able to do that and always, always have the courage to reject co-optation and surrender. And I'll give you one example of this. Folks at Columbia University, I'm going to be crude here. They kissed the feet of Trump to protect their university from funding. And you know what he turned out and did? He cut $500 million from Columbia University, while Columbia University welcomed ICE on their campus and refused to protect Mahmoud Khalil, who was asking for protection and who now has been kidnapped by ICE, a green card holder kidnapped by ICE and sent 1,300 miles away from his home to Louisiana, where he's in Louisiana. Why? So they can find a judge who will override the federal judge who said that they can't deport him. So being successful means doing all of these things: naming the problem, organizing, not mobilizing, strategizing, imagining a different world, resisting co-optation. And in terms of how do we meaningful ways to show up, I think the key word is solidarity, not charity. Solidarity. Solidarity means knowing, really knowing that my liberation is tied to your liberation, understanding what that means. Not a you scratch my back, I scratch your back kind of work, but understanding our liberations are tied. And thereby, right now, the key issue for all of us is Palestine. That is our central issue. If Mahmoud Khalil can be deported because he has been targeted by the Secretary of State as a permanent resident, if he can be deported because of something that he said, no crime that he committed, because of speech that has been politicized and illegally criminalized, if he can be deported, no one is safe. Let me be very clear. Right now, it is Palestine. Tomorrow, it is going to be race or gender or trans rights or climate. They're going to come after all of us. So Palestine becomes the core issue of our struggle right now, not as lovers of Palestine, but as beholders to what remains of democracy in this country.
Thank you so much. That was such a powerful note for us to end our panelist section on. We are going to be kicking it to the Q&A. But first, I want to say thank you to everyone who has been sitting with us, all of the attendees who have been getting this good information. Reminder that the recording of this and all of the materials from all of the organizations who have spoken here will be sent to you in a follow-up. I want to now transition to the Q&A and introduce our absolutely illustrious 10 out of 10 golden child, Lucas, who will be facilitating that.
Yes, thank you. So I'm the Eastern Regional Managing Organizer. Just, one more virtual round of applause for our panelists tonight. Just an excellent job and way to answer a lot of our questions while at the same time providing inspiration in a time when inspiration and hope is very much so needed. So thank you all. And before I begin, I do just want to remind everyone, if you have a question, click down on that Q&A box down at the bottom, type your question in. We only have 10 minutes for our question and answer portion tonight. So if we don't get to your question, I apologize, but we will be providing the contact information to all of our panelists that are with us tonight. So if you do have a question that doesn't get answered, you can contact them directly and go ahead and start that conversation. Same things goes for any of the bills that were mentioned tonight or any of the events mentioned tonight. We want to make sure that everyone is engaged and gets connected with the panelists that are with us tonight. So I see one of the questions we have, and this one will be geared towards Rodolfo first, I think. So is it legal to deport an undocumented person who is only charged with a crime as compared to someone who has been found guilty of a crime? Because I think that has been a question that a lot of us have had with the distinction there in the laws. So I'll pass that to Rodolfo and Helen.
Thank you. Helen, did you want to, or?
Yeah, I can go ahead and say that yes. Unfortunately, regardless of whether you've been charged or convicted, a person can still face, an undocumented individual can still face deportation.
Into that, I just want to add, there's so many different, I believe last time I checked on USCIS.com was over 175 different types of visas and 85 different types of statuses. So it definitely, like Helen said, it depends, and definitely contact your local attorney for more like clear and concise and related like specifically to you answer.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you all. And yeah, definitely want to lift up what you said there, Rodolfo, about many different types of statuses that people could hold. This question is coming uh, towards you, Alexandra. What can be done to prevent our Social Security offices from being closed? And if we can't during this administration, can they be reopened again? And I know you answered that in the chat, but I just wanted for everyone to be able to hear that if they didn't see that answer there.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think one thing we need to be focused on is retaining as much as we can. So blocking the effort to dismantle public agencies and centers in our communities. One thing I'm very concerned about is the talent, the expertise, the knowledge that we lose when these things close down. But it is absolutely the case that we can bring these institutions back, that we can fight for these institutions to come back, and that we can make shifts in how we allocate resources going forward. But it will take all of us coming together and really demonstrating the value and the importance that these public institutions, that this commitment of to each other that we make through building public institutions can create for everyone. So I think, the shutdown is real in terms of, the retraction from community-based services. And the more we can document what that impact is in terms of access, the information that's shared, the better. But I hope that's a good answer.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. Any answer would have been a good answer. So, you get perfect marks for that one. Rania, I see there's an answer, and I'm sure you're dying to answer it. So I will throw that question over to you. Practical suggestions about dismantling capitalism, how we can start, or what that would look like.
For me, it starts by getting rid of the word practical, because practical makes me think that I need to accomplish it within my lifetime. I believe in the liberation of my people. I don't think that'll be accomplished within my lifetime. So let's kind of get rid of the practical, but there are a few things. One, support local workers unions. So UE 150, the local firefighters. I know that the local firefighters in Raleigh right now have been fighting for increased pay. There's not one Raleigh firefighter that has the money to live in Raleigh. They can't afford to live in the very city that they protect. It's insane. So one is support the local union. Second is build community mutual aid. Be able to support each other through that community mutual aid. Third, and most critically, and I'm saying this in North Carolina, which has the largest number of U.S. military bases in the country, we got to fight militarism. Militarism is the arm of capitalism, which means we have to dismantle this myth that serving in the military is patriotic. It is not patriotic. That serving in the military is good. It is good for no one, and it most definitely is not good for the communities who are on the receiving end of those bullets and those bombs and those bunker busters, just shredding their bodies. So dismantling the myth of U.S. military in so many different ways, we need to be doing that. And fourth, and since this is a nonpartisan space, I can say this, both the political parties stink. So let's build another political party. You can choose. There's a lot of third political parties out there. Choose one and build it up, because capitalism is not going to be dismantled, neither by the Democrats nor by the Republicans. So those are some suggestions from small to large.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, and I think we do, and I do just want to say, I know that there's been a lot of bills mentioned tonight. In order to just to keep those clear, we will be sending that, that information will be sent out later. And again, like we will have the contact information sent out to for each of our panelists too, so you could ask that follow-up information about the bills mentioned. There's a lot going through right now, the General Assembly in Congress, so definitely just like a lot to keep our heads wrapped around. I'm running out of time, so I just want to end with this one, and I think it was a really important question to be asked. And Natalie, I see that you already answered it, but maybe we could just go around and give a short answer, each of you. With so much going on right now, and there being daily attacks, this was specifically for the LGBTQ plus community, but on all fronts, with there being attacks daily, what tips do you have for nurturing mental health and holistic well-being? And so we can go around. Rodolfo, what do you, if you would you like to start, and then we could end with Rania on that one, and then we'll move on to our next section.
Yeah, could you repeat the last part? Sorry, about how.
Yeah, just what can we do to nurture our mental health and well-being during these times? What do you do? What do you do to nurture your mental health and well-being during these times?
I hang out with you. No, just kidding. No, in our reality, surround yourself with like-minded individuals like yourself. It's definitely, I've joined a couple fellowships of advocates, educators, leaders like myself, um, who identify as myself. And just surround yourself with those who understand you, where you don't have to spend the first few hours of said relationship, explaining everything about your community to them. I found it to be most helpful, and I've indulged myself in friends, families, and those loved ones who understand. Um, and little by little, things will change, and we have to be those change makers.
Beautiful. All right, Helen, you're up.
Thanks for the question. I think at moments like this, we have to find joy as an act of resistance. And one of those things for me would be, music, dancing, honestly, being with family, being within community, is some of the best things that we could do to take care of our mental well-being, and also being present, because I feel like we're only, in March, if this is the beginning of a very hectic, and honestly, not in the beginning, because we've been going through times, as mentioned, this is not the first time that we're facing, barriers, and we're being targets. So I think in moments like this, it's checking in with loved ones, checking in with our community, and connecting ourselves to our cultural practices, connecting ourselves to whatever it is that grounds us, and also allows us to take a deep breath and take it a day at a time.
Awesome. Beautiful. Thank you so much. All right, Alexandra, we're back to you.
Yeah, I think everything folks have already said resonates in terms of building community, being with community, finding people who you can support and who can support you in this moment, I think is really incredible. And I do want to lift up the point raised earlier about thinking longer term. I think these moments can feel like the timeline is very tight, but if we take the long view, how are we building and acting in these moments to create the conditions for transformation that we know is needed to make sure everybody has what they need? So I try to spend a lot of time thinking about very far down the line, what's the community, and imagining that and really working towards that. So those are some things I do.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, Natalie and Rania, but we do have to do yours really quickly, just because we're running a little bit behind, and that's on me. So I apologize for having to cut yours a little bit short.
In all honesty, I just wanted to take a moment, now that we're talking about mental health, to lift up the name of Gabriela Ortega. A young Latinx individual we lost to mental health a couple weeks ago, and it just came to light in Durham. I want to uplift that and say, folks, please hug your babies. Let them know that the world is scary, but please talk to your kids each night and try and tell them things are rough. They will be okay, and start planning with your kids, y'all. Our kids are not doing well, and we really gotta talk to them.
That's beautiful.
In brief, my community has not been doing well. So we've been grieving for more than 17 months. I personally have been wearing black in mourning of beloved ones who have been killed by US bombs. So in terms of mental health, emotionally, I can offer no suggestions. Rationally, my suggestion would be to read Eduardo Galeano, Days and Nights of Love and War, Children, any book by Eduardo Galeano. And the only thing that keeps me going is that I can fight. The moment I feel I'm unable to fight, then it will be all over. But I can fight, and our communities are still fighting. So I get my strength from them.
Thank you. And thank you again to all of our panelists. We'll be sharing out their information for you to follow up with them later on. And I'm going to pass it over to Lisa to begin the process of us wrapping up tonight's presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. My name is Lisa Harris. I'm a Democracy North Carolina Central Regional Organizer. I know many of you are thinking, as we wrap up, what can I do? Where can I tap into this work? Well, we'll be sending you, as everybody has said, lots of follow-up information. But for now, here are a few ways to get involved. For those of you who are excited to take action, you'll see a QR code on the screen, and visit and bookmark demnc.co/take action page, and take a look out for updates on calls to action. To highlight a big one right now, the House Bill 127 wants to criminalize registering people to vote. You heard it right. We have a written letter to lawmakers and are collecting signatures, which we plan to deliver to the North Carolina General Assembly. You can reach that directly at the QR code, and it will also, the information and the link will be shared with you. During the information is shared after this meeting. Many of you also, if you're here and you're familiar with Mobilize Hub, you can also join us for events, coalition meetings, trainings, rallies, and a host of other things by clicking on the QR code and sharing the links and connecting through Mobilize. Join the amazing Saisa as at our Mooresville office, or one of our incredible regional organizers or regional managers across the state. Sign up to be a volunteer. And as you can see from the regional map here, we have several volunteers. We have several areas and regions that we cover. But remember this, you can also become an elections advocate. Elections advocates attend meetings, document, advocate at your local meetings where decisions around funding, planning for elections in your county are decided. But to do nothing is irresponsible. We look forward to seeing you on the ground. Thank you. And I'm passing it over to my colleague, Caleb.
Hi, everyone. Hey, my name is Caleb Ponson, and I am the development manager here at Democracy North Carolina. As we have seen throughout tonight's presentation, protecting voting rights is more important than ever. From volunteering and phone banking to attending County Board of Elections meetings, sharing our advocacy resources, there are so many ways to get involved this year. But first, I just got to say, grassroots donors make this work possible. Our organizing programs in North Carolina are 100% funded by everyday donors just like you. With their help in 2025, Democracy NC is promoting civic education, empowering students, and advocating for local communities. And we need your support to keep these programs going strong. Tonight, I just want to share 3 easy ways you can support our work with a charitable gift. The first you can help is by becoming a regional sponsor. This year, we're introducing a new sponsorship program where you can fund specific organizing activities in your region. For example, we've got a lot coming up in Wake and Harnett County over the next couple months, and Sugalema and Jason definitely need your help making these events possible. Please reach out to us if you're interested in becoming a regional sponsor. Second, please consider joining the Democracy North Carolina Giving Society. We launched this program to build long-term, meaningful relationships with supporters across all 100 counties. Giving Society members help fund legislative advocacy, volunteer trainings, and nonprofit voter engagement, all critical programs that are the backbone of what we do. And last, please consider becoming a monthly sustainer. Monthly donations keep our work going year-round and help fund programs like Democracy Summer, civic education resources, panel discussions, and outreach with local churches and faith ambassadors. So to make a contribution, you can scan the QR code, give us a call, send us a check by mail, or visit democracync.org/donate. This year, we are fighting to protect the rights of our families, our friends, and the future of North Carolina. So please stand with us and make your gift today. Thank you.
And I'm going to just let you all know that we are extremely thankful for you all joining us today. All of the things that we talked about will be emailed out to you, and the information about the different participants, also a video recording of everything that was shared today. We also want to make sure that you follow us on social media as we continue to update you. Amazing call that was put together by a team of people at Democracy North Carolina. Also want to thank the panelists, and we try to align our practice and espoused values. So thank you all tonight. We will be having more of these, and if you need anything from us, feel free to reach out. We love you all.